So I knew, from the moment this year was being planned back in 2022, when I was first putting together ideas for what would become the year of leadership, I knew there was one person who was certainly getting in here. One person who would be definitely a bit of a wildcard present. And it could be a video which gets me hundreds of thousands of views, or it could be a video which gets me 100 views. And honestly, I didn't care, because I really wanted to do this leader. I really did. George S. Hammond. You see, other people, when they watched Stargate, they were really intrigued by the actions of Dr. Weir or Colonel O'Neill or Sam Carter or any of the others you have there. Oh, poor Rodney. I always feel sorry for poor Rodney. For me, the person who stood out most, the most realistic in terms of actual role, actual function, and how they worked, was George Hammond. I basically decided very early on that the Stargate teams pretty much are operating on Special Forces protocol. And that makes sense. If you consider that's their scenario, that's what they were doing. The other thing, when you have a limited pool of senior officers who know what's going on and who are available, means it's quite obvious that occasionally the general is going to need to do things which, frankly, a normal general wouldn't be doing. You wouldn't normally expect an admiral to do. But there is a reason for it. We're not talking Star Trek, which, by this point, the video for the Star Trek admirals has actually been recorded and actually come out. And why they wind me up. Well, the thing is, in that scenario, you are not dealing a secret organization. You're not trying to keep a secret of space travel, of going out into space, of all the technologies you're dealing with, all the situations you're dealing with, quiet. So you don't have a limited pool of people you can draw from. In Starfleet, you have a theoretically massive pool of people you're drawing from. Considering how many member planets and states, that they have. In this scenario, though, it's very much, they are functioning on a shoestring budget. That's it. It's a shoestring budget. You know why? It's very realistic. You've got the general regularly arguing with various funders at the Pentagon, at the White House, in Congress, asking for more money. That's perfectly normal. You show the various machinations he has to deal with on a regular basis. You also see his staff. And ultimately, Hammond of Texas is one of the most relatable characters you will ever have on television. He was. He was this man who was prepared to do what needed to be done. Who loved the people who worked for him, worked with him, was very proud of them, but was also prepared, because it was his role, to take the burden of sending them off to war. Of deciding whether or not they needed to mount a rescue mission, or whether any rescue mission would ultimately lead to the loss of more life and frankly wasn't worth it. His age is about right. He's not randomly a young or too old. He fits in there. And he very consciously is a presence. Think about how important the scenes are. We sometimes talk about the action scenes and the other things in the Stargate program, and they were always pretty darn cool. Yes. But think about his presence on the screen when they were working things out. How often it was having meetings with him. It was him conducting a debrief. acting as a senior unit commander of a Special Forces force and honestly doing that job of a debrief. It makes sense. What he's doing makes sense. His role makes sense. And yes, we never really have a clear idea of who's his second in command, but that also makes sense to an extent. Again, the Special Forces program. They probably have another senior officer, possibly a 1-star, possibly another 2-star, sitting in Area 51, dealing with all the issues down that's to do with that. And you have Colonel O'Neill is recognised to be the senior colonel in the force, which again makes sense. You're running things through colonels. That again makes sense for the US Air Force. It really does. One of the things you have to realise, again, is people often try and look at the Stargate team and start analysing it as an army formation, or sometimes even a navy formation. And no, it's an Air Force formation. And you have to think about the fact that colonels are squadron commanders in the Air Force, but they still fly their fighters. In the US Air Force, they still fly their fighter aircraft, they can still be engaging, getting air-to-air kills. There is nothing unusual of a colonel going to the front in the US Air Force in their thought process. Really isn't. What I always thought was interesting was that they were 4-person teams. I can again understand why, and there is to an extent a desire for it to be a 4-person team, because that does make it more economical in terms of paying actors, etc. But I always thought, well, you'd probably have initial teams of 4-person teams, but you'd have larger teams, which would be your response reaction teams, instead of having to draw multiple teams together and go, yes, we're going to combine 5 different teams together, and have a reaction squad. And it always made me strange when they said, oh, we now have Marines as well, and we have these. I'm sort of going, okay, so if you have the US Marines along here, that's your heavy weapons reaction squad to go pull your teams out of trouble. They probably need to be a 16-32-person unit with heavy weapons able to charge through and cause a huge amount of damage. They're not going to be 4 people. The whole point is they're going into a high-threat situation where it's already weapons hot. You need to go in with the ability to take casualties and keep fighting and keep rolling the punches. You need to be taking in crew-serve weapons, which are going to be 2-person moves. You need larger formations. But that's not what we're discussing today. We're discussing Hammond and how he was involved and how he ran it. And the thing is, I'm going to be doing videos like I did previously on the Star Trek Admirals, but I wanted to start us off with a bit of a discussion of Donald Sinclair Davis, who played him. Now, Davis is special. He really is. There's a great quote from the interview, which I've got up there, which I've got part of the quote, and then the next part where he goes, the person who was really pushing the one-dimensional image didn't have a multi-year contract. They were only on for for the pilot. I was on for 5 years. I wasn't prepared to let them dictate to me what was going on. He'd served in Korea. Not in the Korean War. During the Vietnam War, he had served as a captain in the 7th Infantry in Korea. He'd also worked as a stuntman, stunt coordinator, all sorts of things. University professor. He's always felt he was more of a carpenter than anything else. But yeah, this quote of his from this wonderful interview really sums it up. And I thought he was a 2-dimensional figure. And I had served in the army in Korea during the Vietnam War. I was an officer. I started out as a 2nd lieutenant, got out as a captain. I had served under officers that were heroic. Certainly, some who weren't. But who were, as they really are in the army, a cross-section of humanity. I served under guys that were poets, and painters, and dreamers, and schemers. And when I saw Hammond, he was by the book, a foil for an O'Neill. And it just wasn't true to what the service is really like. And so they were kind enough to take my suggestions to heart, and they let me, especially as the show went on, make him more and more human. And honestly, it's when you start to realise that he often ad-libs some of his lines or modifies his lines. You start to realise that this character comes out as much from this man as it does from the acting and of the others around him and the writing team, allowing him the freedom with their lines, with their work, to be able to interpret them within a latitude. And whenever I'm told by people that Hollywood can't do senior officers, that, you know, the reason why the admirals in Star Trek are so bad is because they just can't, they don't understand admirals, they can't write it. Whenever you look at, you know, various other science fiction scenarios where there's been senior officers, anything above a multi-level command, and it just goes weird, I point to him. Babylon 5 was decent. It was certainly made more sense than a lot of others. But let's be honest, the gold standard, the standard by which they all should be measured, is Donald Sinclair Davis's George S. Hammond. And how a proud Missourian played a proud Texan so well, I am not sure, because honestly I'd have thought pride in either would have conflicted with the other. But he did. He did. And I think it's his testament to the value he brought to the show, and to a testament to the value he brought to the whole series, that even when he was ill and he was diabetic, heart issues, all sorts of things by then, he'd not been good to his body. He'd been very active and very clumsy. These two things are not a good combination. By the end, you know, they are still adjusting filming around him because they know how important he is. They don't just write him out. And honestly, if he hadn't died when he did, I'm sure there would have been more scenes with him, because the producers loved him. They were always coming up with ways to bring him back. You know, he went off to go be commander of the space program and all sorts of things as time went on. And then a special advisor to the president, and they were bringing him back. Honestly, if it had gone on much longer, I wouldn't be surprised if he'd come back as president. If they found a way to make him president, because they liked him. They liked the man who played it, and they liked the character he'd portrayed and developed with them. And I have to say, a lot of the Stargate fans do as well. And, again, this is one of the reasons why I love watching Stargate. The ships are believable, the science fiction is believable, but most importantly, the characters are believable, and the way they portray him, they allow him to be portrayed, is believable. I do love one of the things he apparently always insisted of was, no, there's got to be an NCO who's in charge of my office. And they made sure they had. And what I love is that NCO character went from a random background character to someone who was the speaking part, who was a part of the show, sometimes the comedic relief. And they allowed that to happen. And there were other staff around him. He was quite obviously a senior officer who had a staff, and it comes down to the fact that they were working with, listening to their Air Force advisors, the people they got to talk about the Air Force, and they were listening to him, and they were actually researching things and doing it properly. And seeing as they were doing it when they were doing it, with actually probably a far smaller budget than Star Trek usually gets, it really starts to grind my gears when people use that defense about the cost, etc., for the Starship, for Star Trek. And, sorry, for Star Trek. It really grinds my gears. But with that being said, let's go on to the videos and let's see how his acting works. Now, the easiest thing to do would have been to start with the first scene of Hammond in Stargate to really demonstrate the character and demonstrate his role, but that wasn't the scene I went for. That is not the scene I went for. This, to me, sums up a lot of General Hammond.
Hurry, sir.
A lot of his approach.
Punctuality is emblematic of civilized behavior.
They do they?
We'll be transported almost immediately upon our arrival to their Talao, or speaking area. Once there, the Taldor may or may not be
Getting
willing
a
to show you
briefing
their
in
actual
corridors.
Why is that?
things. To put it politely, sir, there's
Very West Wing. Very, very West Wing style, briefing corridors. But it does make sense in an underground command bunker when you're running along that the person who's going with you assisting. And again, the general's not going on his own. He's got another officer who's a specialist coming with him to assist him. Is doing a briefing.
xenophobic. To put it frankly, they're arrogant, narrow-minded, self-centered.
I get the picture.
But they do seem to want to maintain diplomatic contact.
Special envoy, you may embark when ready.
Well, here goes.
Since this is your first time, sir, a quick word of advice. It's better to act.
That's why I picked it. First time through the gate. In Stargate, this was always a big thing for any character, and how they approached it was a really illustrative thing of their personality and of their position, and what they were expected of themselves and what they expected of the people around them.
Exhale just prior to crossing the event horizon. One's instinct is to inhale immediately upon arriving on the other side. Also,
I think I'll figure it out on the way. You're sure they dialed the correct address?
yes, sir.
Things I do for these people.
That's it, basically. The things I do for these people. That sums up Hammond. That sums up his role, what he does, how he approaches life, how he approaches working with all the people in the organization he's in charge of. He does the things he does for the people he's in charge of, for the country he's been a member of the armed forces of for decades by this point, for the nation he is a proud citizen of, for the planet he believes in, for the people he is part of. He does the things for these people. He makes the decision because it's his job. What he's required to do on their behalf is to make decisions for them. And sometimes it's to go to bat for them. Now, you've heard me in the past critique when admirals, etc., are going out on solo strange missions. Well, for a diplomatic mission, especially in the context of Stargate, when realistically, as we discuss later, there aren't many people in the Pentagon who know. There are even fewer in terms of government officials who know what's going on for most of this period. So your options realistically in terms of personnel you can send for a diplomatic mission would be the President or Hammond if you need someone who's more senior than your special envoys or your colonels. And realistically, the President disappearing is going to be kind of obvious. Hammond already works in Stargate Command. He already goes down into the bottom of Cheyenne Mountain. He already does that, so frankly, he disappears from public view often enough that no one's going to miss him if he's disappearing off-world. So it's a really, really strange situation in many regards to be, where it does actually make sense, him going out and doing these things. But also, it does make me wonder, it does, to an extent, poke a bit of fun at the US government's approach to defense spending. Because one of the things that you sort of realize is that they are prepared to spend all the money they are happy to spend all the money they can, if they need to, on technology, on equipment. And yet they haven't properly staffed positions. When you consider it, one of the other things we'll be talking about later, he's going to use the figure it takes $1 billion just shy of $1 billion just to turn the lights on. Keep the lights running for while they're doing the work. It's $7.4 billion a year, the program. And if you consider that compared to the whole defense budget, that could quite easily be a hidden secret program. But on the other side, instead of go, well, you've got a major general running this, which is about right. It's about the seniority you talk about. But you've got no brigadiers. You've got no second in commands. You've got no other senior officers. You haven't got the levels you need below that. And one interesting thing is when you look at Stargate, unlike some other programs, they are not shy of hiring in a load of extras. They are quite happily sticking people in uniforms all around there. They regularly do in episodes. They fill them. They fill the background with people in uniforms. So you could quite easily, like what happens with Walter, the NCR we talk about, turn someone from a small part into quite a big part if you need to, or just to keep them as a small part, as a second in command, as another senior officer wandering around. But they're always making the point of they gotta have a very tight budget from the government. And again, this is a secret program. Those things two combined make having a spare general officer sitting there for these sorts of missions, or to go and do the sorts of duties that he's required to do, would be a difficult sell. It really would be. But let's get into more of Hammond being the great general. And now we are going back to the first episode, and I'm going to just run this through, and then I'm going to talk through how it illustrates him being a good general officer, and be acting the way you would expect a general officer in this position doing so. So, I admit that I am probably going to get no advertising revenue from this video today, because of having these vegans up on the screen. Probably going to get zilch. So please note, at the end there's going to be a shameless book plug where I'm going to plug my book, and I'm going to talk about how people fund this channel. If you're interested in supporting this channel, please go watch that bit. And remember, this is a thing for everyone. If you want a YouTuber, someone that you might like to watch their videos, don't just press the subscribe button. Make sure you see that, go to the bell and make it fill it in, so it's a fill-in bell, because otherwise YouTube decides what videos you get to watch, not you.
Right. We'll have the prototype probe shipped from MIT.
General, we don't need that probe.
We don't?
Nope. This'll do.
Here to explain this concept?
Chevron 5 encoded.
Jackson has allergies.
I get it.
You'll know this came from me and not from someone. With all due respect, sir, like yourself.
Basis check to go. Up twin level check. Back up check.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Okay, all three team reply.
Chevron 7 locked.
That's always cool. I mean, that graphic is always cool.
The object should reach final destination in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The object should now be through the Abydos Stargate.
Now what?
Now we wait.
Sergeant insisting on calling it an object, not a box of tissues. An object.
If Daniel's still around, he'll know what the message means.
What if the aliens get it?
Well, they could be blowing their noses right now.
They could be planning an attack.
Oh, come on, Samuels. Let me be the cynic around here, okay? Sir, this could take some time.
Generals don't run. They really don't. Now, what did we see in that? What did we see in there? Well, for starters, you saw an officer with a staff around him. There were lots of other blue uniforms. There were lots of people standing around talking nearby. There were a lot of personnel. It was quite obviously a base. He was listening to various opinions. He was letting other officers be the attack dogs. As a rule, generals and admirals, the reason why they bring a staff with them is so that they don't have to make a decision or argue a position themselves until they need to make a final decision. If you're going to deal with someone who's going to be putting forward opinion, Colonel O'Neill here, in this case, you have someone else arguing the counter with him. You don't want to be the one arguing with him. You want to be able to sit back and listen, absorb the information, and make a decision. Your staff are who bring you the options. You then make the decision between them. They will bring you the information. You might even define the options. You might well come up with some of the options yourself. But you'll want them to discuss them. Because the whole point is, it's by running the staff that you run the command. And by running the command, you achieve the mission objectives that you're setting out to do. You can't be everywhere at once. As I've talked about it before, good leadership from an admiral or general's perspective is often about running a small team to run a larger team. And letting that small group dynamics work out for you. And that means that sometimes you've just got to let people argue. You don't express an opinion, but you make a decision. This whole scene, the whole way through, all things going on. Others are putting forward ideas. But it's him making the decision. No point does anyone think they're in charge other than him. He's in charge. He's making the decision. And that's the important thing. That's what these officers are there for. They are there to make decisions. Life or death decisions quite often. And they have to weigh everything up. And one of the things about Hammond is he's quite honest with his character and with his frame of reference of what his priorities are, but also what his guidance is, what his rules are. I talked about this at the beginning, but if I bring it up again, the slideshow is still there. The quote, "As long as I am in command of the SGC, we will hold ourselves to the highest ethical standard." That's good. That's very, very good. And there's a reason for doing that. Holding yourself to this standard gives you a position to argue from. And he needs to argue a lot. Because he needs to keep dealing with both threats from the world and off-world. And he has to keep the SGC going through both of them. Navigating that path, you need to be sure of something. And if you can't be sure of the politics, you need to be sure of the ethics. Because that gives you some foundation to build from. And so, that's what he does. Saying all that, he does have to balance often the realities of being the sole senior officer who can realistically do things. Right up until you've got basically General O'Neill made a general, and then he's made more senior, and others are brought in at that point. There, you do have a plurality of senior command at that point. From that point onwards, officers who you can call on, other personnel to do things. But he does also sometimes enjoy that privilege for certain reasons. And this is another great example, this scene, of when he does use that advantage of being the sole senior officer to do what he feels is ethically the right thing to do. When also you could argue that he's also going, I am probably the most expendable person here, in my opinion. I am the most expendable person here, in my opinion. Because I want my people to get home, I want them to be safe, but also they're all engineers, they're all vital. This also has, I will say, one of the funniest moments in television history ever seen to mankind.
How much time will we have? I'm guessing a few minutes. Maybe less.
Sir, on another word, Colonel.
Benefit of being the only senior officer: if you decide to do something stupid, there is no one around to outrank you and argue with you.
Do it now.
General. Godspeed.
Apart from perhaps your senior NCO who works as your gatekeeper. That, by the way, was Walter. If you don't know him, you should do. He's, again, one of the other characters which really makes the show stand out for me. Because, yes, he does have a gate room function of being the guy, the person who goes Chevron 4 encoded and all these things and typing those in. But again, that to an extent makes sense. He's the senior NCO and operations team member to look after the general and make sure the things are working properly for him. Having a role outside of that in the command center, especially in a special forces scenario, makes sense. Because why have someone else for that duty? If the general's going to be in that position anyway, his senior NCO will probably need to have a job in that. And this is doing something by definition stupid, because it's toxic fumes. And they're not sure what else is down there, hence he's taken a gun with him.
General, can you hear me?
I'm here in the engine room.
Open the third panel down on the center column.
We'll leave all that. We will now go to... well... this could be a very serious scene. It could have been a very serious scene. He's been brought back through the rings, which are sort of the transporter system on Stargate for Gual technology.
He may need mouth to mouth.
Look at that man's face. That man has just been told he has to perform mouth to mouth with a general. That terror is real. That terror is truly there. This is what adds to this show. This is not another person. This is a general. This could go very bad for my career. Putting in position, doing the necessary thing. And the relief! The relief! I will always maintain that is one of the best written, funniest scenes to ever appear on television. Honestly, that guy's face sells it all. And yeah, at times I will be very annoyed, and I will say, you know, how bad it is when you have admirals running around doing silly things on their own, or generals running around doing silly things on their own without a team of them. But sometimes it fits with the character. They're not just doing it out of nowhere. It fits with the character. Hammond's approach to command, that command is about service. That command is about responsibility. That leadership is about service and about responsibility, comes through the entire series. And this was heavily, I feel, put in by Davis's work. I think Davis is massively important for this coming through in the character and for this being the driving feature of his personality. But also it fits with the vast majority of senior officers. Some are good, some are bad, but the vast majority, if they're in that situation, probably make the same decision. Because they can do this, and then they don't have to write the letters home. And they all hate writing the letters home. Now this scene is sort of the other side of that. It's the fact of what he has to do as a general officer, what he has to deal with.
Senator Kinsey is chairman of the Appropriations Committee. He's demanded
Oh great, politician time.
to know what's behind the line item the Pentagon refers to as Area 52.
That was inventive with naming.
That would be the Stargate.
An unofficial project. That just happens to cost $7.4 billion a year to operate. The President and the Joint Chiefs thought if they granted the Senator the appropriate clearances, let him in on the existence of the SGC, he'd recognize its importance to national security and authorize the expenditure.
Okay, you're applying logical thought processes to a politician. No. It rarely works out that way in life. It rarely works out that fun. Oh, it really doesn't. So the question is, what's the plan now?
I take it he did.
Yeah, it did backfire. After reading your mission reports and being fully briefed by Colonel Samuels, the Senator decided the SGC will receive no further funding from the Treasury.
That effectively shuts us down, sir.
Very effectively. Cost nearly $1 billion just to turn the lights on around here.
How about a bake sale? Yard sale? Garage?
This is what I look like when I'm not laughing, Tom.
Car wash?
Hello. So all this comes down to, again, that's the second paragraph here. He's not just a foil for O'Neill. He is a humanized character. He has made him human. He's given him that form. But also, you feel sympathy for him dealing with the politics. You understand the amount of effort he's tried. You understand what he's dealt with. But there's the fact is, there's that serious bit of he's able to bring, some solemnness to it by going, this is not my happy face. This is not my laughing face. But then he does giggle a bit at the end when the last joke's made about the bake sale. Mostly because, probably, the fact that he, because of who's number one on his speed dial. And it's always very careful. Number one is the granddaughter. Number two is the president. And that's always a quirk which I really liked, and it's a case of, this is a man who doesn't care about showing off. He doesn't need to show off. He's a Major General in charge, and later on Lieutenant General in charge of one of the most secure, secret, and important facilities on the entire planet. He's running a galactic war. And, yeah, he doesn't need to show off. He doesn't need to show off. He doesn't need to go, look at all the powerful people I have on my phone list. No. Most important person to me in the world is who I press 1 for to call and talk to. That's my granddaughter. That is... how do I put this politely? That is also an ultimate boss move, I would say. It's basically going, no, I don't order people by how important they are to the world. I order people by how important they are to me. Because that's what matters. I liked that. I liked that a lot. And you could almost imagine him saying to himself on occasion, not what should I do, or, what's the good thing to do? What can I do and still be able to look in my granddaughters in the eye and feel like I'm their grandfather? What can I do? You are definitely getting better, aren't you? You're very keen on getting to your bully. No, you cannot have a squeaky bully. You'll just squeak the whole time. He's promising me he won't squeak. We'll see. If he starts squeaking, I'll pause the recording and record later. There you go. Don't squeak. But yeah, his thing is, his metric is, can he look at his grandchildren? Can he talk to them and still hold his head up high when he's with them and justify what he's done? And you really do get this sense of that's his morality. That's his starting point. I want to do a slightly different episode here to show something slightly different. I do admit, one of the things you have with the Stargate series is you have such a broad spectrum of episodes to draw from to look at Hammond's performance and look at Davis's portrayal of Hammond, and that allowed Hammond to develop. As I said, he was in every single episode pretty much, showing off his skills, showing off his capabilities, developing and evolving the character, which does give him an unfair advantage versus most of the other admirals we could ever talk about in science fiction, and generals and the senior officers, because usually it's not the senior officers who get the attention and time. And Hammond doesn't, versus SG-1. SG-1, it's always done through the prism of SG-1. You're seeing him in the background normally to what SG-1 is doing. And you're getting this impression of him through their eyes, through their lens of what they're seeing. But the thing is, they still do a lot of world building straight from the first episode. First time you see him, you know exactly what he is, you know his purpose, and you know his style, his personality. And it's in episodes like this, where sometimes when he's not even present, you build the background around him and around the Stargate team, so you know what the scenario is going on about them.
All scans came back clean, sir.
Thank you, Sergeant.
We may have only lost data from the last 24 hours before the event. We'll know more when I can hook back up with the SGC archives in the Pentagon.
I'd like you and Sergeant Seiler to double-check your results before we do that.
Yes, sir.
Major?
You're kidding.
They're being hacked.
Ryder! Emergency lighting?
In the mount room, yes, sir. A small power usage anomaly. General Hammond said we should check it out before we resume normal operations.
Forget to change light bulb, Seiler?
It's not my job, sir. Yes, sir, light bulb. Great music.
There's a very interesting thing here. One of the things pointed out often is leveled at science fiction programs is that, the scientist / the brains geek of the squad often seems to know everything about everything. And to an extent, that's not without base in special forces teams. Usually you will have a technical specialist and you'll have the various team members, and they will do a lot of reading in prep before they go and do things. So they will read up on a lot of areas they don't have knowledge on, so they can prep. It might not give them the full spectrum of understanding of the topic, but it will give them some decision-making capabilities of understanding. Because to make decisions, you don't need to have a specialist knowledge always. In fact, most often you don't. If you consider, again, when we talk about senior officers on ships or any kind of formation, they will have specialists around them who will know their individual areas far greater, or any company, any organization. There'll be specialists who will know their areas far greater than the people in charge of them. But the thing is, the people in charge of them need to know enough about all the different specialisms beneath them to be able to work out when they get what is the good thing to tell them to do, and to be able to properly support them. It's kind of similar in this sort of scenario. That's what how I fix it in my head. But that was important there from Sergeant Silas. That's not my role. There's someone else who does light bulbs. I do different things. And that's an important factor to think about. That shows that this is a larger organization. There are people there to support them. And again, this is differentiating between the roles and of the personnel. And that matters. That's something you need, because again, it's about world building. It's about the organization you're building around it. And one of the reasons why Hammond stands out to me as this best character you can have is the world that's been built around the Stargate teams and how his role fits into that. It's not like and I keep using Star Trek example, that's because I've already done a video about it, but so you can go see from the video what I've said about Star Trek and the admirals in there. You know very much that if there's an intelligence briefing, there's going to be an intelligence officer present. There's going to be someone there the information's come from. They're going to explain how it's come in, where it's come from, who's been there, what they're gathering, what they're talking about. There's going to be the personnel there. They do the world building. They build. They give you the full effect of it. And that's useful. That, to me, makes a far richer, far more interesting category. And the story richer. And it then builds up to episodes like this, to parts like this, where...
I have my orders too, Colonel. I obey them. Take Colonel O'Neill to the holding room. Let's give him some time to think about things while I decide what to do with him.
I would say, though, I didn't pick this video for this scene. I picked it for what comes next.
This guy is a real opportunity for me, because when we start out in the pilot, he's pretty hard-nosed and straight ahead. But what I'm trying to do is bring a few levels to him that, you know, show some understanding, that make him a little more likable, that still he's a character that has to live up to his role, which is, in real life, a general is a general is a general. I would rather not order you to do this. So I would like all of those willing to attempt the rescue of SG-1 to take one step.
I do have to say, I did consider putting in the episode, the video where he just is all the recordings of "You have a go, you have a go, you have a go," which was his catchphrase of sending missions off. It was a good catchphrase. It really was. But that's, again, one of the interesting things we have with this whole series. Richard Dean Anderson, all the Amanda Tapping, Christopher Judd, all these actors were allowed to inhabit their roles and to really grow them and develop them, and that they also studied them. You know, this is the thing. It's one of those shows which provides great examples for teaching when you're doing teaching history, and if you want to try and teach people sort of understanding of command structures and how decisions can flow and develop, and you want to put on a video for some reason. Let's be honest, if you find yourself you've got to teach this teach that particular topic on the 6 o'clock slot on a Friday afternoon, let me put it this way, having a video or something you can point to that's going to be a bit interactive and you can bounce off rather than you just lecturing can help. They inhabited these roles. They studied for them. They developed them. And especially in the case of Davis here, who with his own army background, yes, but he understood what a senior officer was. He understood what someone at Hammond's level was required to do. Maybe from watching them as a captain, but also from studying them. He was a carver, he was a professor, he was all sorts of things, as I've already talked about in his life and careers. But he was also a reader. He was a student of humanity and observing others. And he used that. In fact, most good actors are. One of the interesting tricks that's often forgotten about World War I, World War II spycraft, especially when they're teaching SOE agents and those sort of people to go abroad, the people who they brought in to teach them how to study body language and study the people around them were mostly professional actors. Because good actors study the world around them, because all of it is source material. and they absorb it. I think about what those people are, because you can't live everything in your life. But an actor's job is to portray things which they might not have lived. And the best way to be able to do that is to try and understand it by empathy for people, emulation of people. And you get that from watching people. Watching them.
Very well. SG units 3, 5, 6, and 11, bring them home.
See my point here about there should be a heavy response team, which doesn't involve you putting together 3, 5, 4 teams, 16. You should have a heavy response team. This is why you need what the U.S. Marines should have been providing.
Good luck, Colonel.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go move out!
Thanks to appearances on Twin Peaks, The X-Files, and several feature films, Don...
Why was the Colonel yelling like a Sergeant Major? Why? And whilst the whole interview is worthwhile watching, there is another bit which I wanted to add in.
It's very much a character-driven show. It's not so much about being in spaceships and intergalactic wars. It's more about people, dealing with people, and dealing with them very much in the way that people from different backgrounds here have to learn to deal with one another. And I think that that makes these scripts interesting in a way apart from the run-of-the-mill science fiction fare. You have distinguished yourself by heroism involving voluntary risk of life. Against impossible odds, with only the help of your team members Teal'c and Dr. Daniel Jackson, you destroyed both Gould spacecraft that were poised to attack this world. Your exemplary courage and heroism reflect great credit upon yourself and the United States Air Force. Congratulations, Captain.
In the episode...
Right, before we get into Gwalds being Gwalds, that last scene though, the pride he was putting in his voice, the image he was projecting, that's the nice part. That's the bit generals really like to do. Seniors really being able to give out medals. That's the high point of the job, because that means they're home, they're safe, and you can reward them for the job well done. That's a good thing. That's very much a good thing. But it's getting them there, that's the trouble. Now, I've already mentioned about the wider team around him and how the world building does. Well, this really is highlighted when Walter transfers from being Hammond's aide to being O'Neill's aide when O'Neill's is promoted and Hammond is promoted.
Morning, sir.
Walter?
You start to get an idea of the structure which Hammond's built up around himself.
6J908. They requested permission to bring an alien life form back to the base for further study. Sir, it's just a plant. Your 0830 debriefing is SG2 regarding your recent mission to P8F 809. Folders on your desk, along with the personnel files you have yet to review.
How many do I have left?
Notice that Walter is literally giving him the information, but it is telling him what he's got in schedule, but it's not giving him the information. That's not his job. That's not his area of specialism. He is literally there to make sure he turns up at the right place at the right time during the day and that people do not waylay him who shouldn't. Good luck.
All of them. Right. Colonel Rudnell has asked me to show you some bunting samples, and Captain Corrigan's still waiting approval on the buffet menu.
Bunting.
The joys of a general's life.
John,
General.
you are aware of the fact that this is the most secure military facility on the face of the planet.
Well, actually, sir, there are still a number of issues to be resolved.
1000 hours, sir.
That's Walter basically relying his boss. Don't get distracted now. That's something you're dealing with later. Let's move on.
Thank you.
Walter? Sorry, sir. General O'Neill. Mark Gilmore. He's your new administrative aide.
General, did I order
No,
one?
sir.
Yes, you do need to have them. You have got that much paperwork. You're a general. Deal with it.
Do I really
Yes,
need...
sir.
Civilian?
I've been an analyst at the CIA for the last 8 years. Mostly background checks, but I did have top-level clearance.
He was assigned by General Hammond.
Ah, well, in that case, welcome aboard.
Normally a general would probably pick their own team and own staff, but let's be honest, with the character you're dealing with, this is Hammond showing how much he cares about the people below who are coming up behind him. He knows what O'Neill's weakness is. He knows O'Neill would never get around to appointing such a person themselves. And there you go. He's done it for him. A parting gift.
How about if I give you a tour around?
Had one, sir. Dang. Very exciting to find
Really
out
trying to get out the paperwork, Jack.
General, Euro 830.
Yes. You're here to assist me, right? How about if you dive into those...
Sir, you really need to redefine yourself.
Walter's such a good NCO. Just quietly explain. Well, warrant officer, I would presume due close to equivalent actually to his rank and master sergeant, I'm fairly certain. It basically quietly reminding his boss what he needs to do. He's there to keep him on track. He's there to keep him focused, and he's there to, in many ways, make sure his time is as efficiently used as possible because he has so much to do. And it's very easy to get distracted, especially when you, in this case, O'Neill is used to action. He's used to being the colonel of SG-1, in charge of the team going out doing those operations. He's now got to sit back and coordinate a lot of action. That is a transition. That is a change. A very big change. And going through it can make or break an officer. There are times when I read some really interesting comments about getting promoted to this sort of senior ranks and under my videos, and I've got to do one about age of sale promotions because there are lots of people who believe that you automatically would be aged up into an admiral's position as a captain in the Royal Navy or any navy. If you'd been in there long enough and there was a gap, you'd be made a captain. Or captain would be made an admiral. And whilst there certainly were periods where it was like that, those periods disappear rather quickly. And there are lots of officers who retire as captains. Lots of officers who are, sometimes if they won't retire, I won't take the hint from the Admiralty, are made Admirals of the Yellow if they really absolutely have to, but usually they just leave them unemployed sitting ashore places. Basically the ones they make Admirals of the Yellow are the ones who are too politically connected for them to kick out. But making them an Admiral of the Yellow means they give them their promotion, but then they're told to go away and don't come back. You can go and become a Rear Admiral of a county or something like that if you need to. You can do something nice in the House of Lords. But you know, it's the same still with modern forces. There are lots of officers who make colonel who will never make general, or a general, or as you know, officers who make captain who won't make admiral. And the obvious answer to that is look at how many captains you need versus how many admirals. Look at how many captains you need versus how many admirals. How many colonels you need versus how many generals. There's a big drop. A massive drop off.
Thank you. Does Mr. Gilmore have...
Follow me.
Bye-bye, Jack.
He's not like other generals.
Actually, he's not like other people.
I take it I've got some catching up to do.
Civilian aid, senior NCO, alliance being formed.
Well, I better get started.
I can't tell you how happy we all are to have you here.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Really,
really happy.
Thank you. Sorry.
And this sort of retroactively confirming what we suspected was already from all the other discussions, all the other things we've seen around of how Hammond was acting, of the organisation Hammond has built. O'Neill has inherited Hammond's organisation, and Hammond has made sure it works for him. Although that will only work up to a certain point, because, well, Hammond is gonna Hammond. And this is where Hammond really gets to Hammond.
Come on, Jack. It isn't going to be on a permanent basis. I didn't let you go in the first place. What makes you think I'm going to change my mind? Because. Can you try to do better than that? Because they're going to need somebody who can translate ancient. I'm the most qualified person left on the planet for the mission. Which is exactly why you're going to stay right here. Because I'll quit.
Being a general really does require management resources, and that person is a resource. Daniel Jackson.
Why didn't you just hold your breath? You haven't done that in a while. General.
Lieutenant General Hammond is back. Brigadier General at this point, O'Neill. Now remember, Brigadier General just said, Jackson can't do something.
Jack, I let myself in. Hope you don't mind.
Absolutely not. Welcome.
Thank you.
Missed the chair?
Actually, I do.
Want it back?
As a matter of fact, I do. My new one just isn't the same.
That's not exactly what I meant.
Doctor.
Yes, that is what a Lieutenant General can do. I want your chair. It's mine. I have more pull, and I will sometimes use it for really annoying things. But I think in this case, that chair does fit him.
Dr. Jackson, nice to see you again.
Likewise, we miss you around here, sir. So, to what do we owe this pleasure?
I came to ask if you'd be interested in joining the mission to Atlantis.
You did.
He's the most qualified person on this planet, and the mission commander needs someone who can translate ancient.
Really?
With all due respect, sir, I think you should tell the mission commander that I need Daniel right here.
You just did.
I did.
That's the oh sugar face. Remember I showed you the face of the person who had to perform mouth to mouth on a general? Well, that's the oh sugar, I'm going to lose this argument face.
You, sir? Yes. Request denied. Dr. Jackson, you're with me. I'll have the chair shipped to Washington. You can requisition a new one.
I'll do that, sir.
That's not even the killer blow. The killer blow is coming.
We leave tomorrow. Oh, and I'll be taking Walter, too.
That is a senior officer going off to a mission. He wasn't expecting to have to get this sort of mission, so he left his staff in place to support Jack's transition to being in charge. But now he's got to go off on a new mission. He needs to take some people with him. He can rely from his old staff to form his new active staff, and that includes the senior NCO. That's coming. Walter's going with him. He wants Daniel Jackson. He wants the translator, and he's also nicking the chair. But that's probably because there's a running gag over Jack abusing that chair to an extent. So I would say that's mainly because that had been his chair and Jack had been doing damage to it. So yeah, these things happen. Don't abuse. Hammond can save his old chair. It's been his loyal companion. The fact that they were able to have whole scenes like that, seconds, where no words were spoken but so much was communicated, really did set the series apart, I felt. Really did set the series apart. And, well, yes, that is a Lieutenant General in action. That is Hammond, who has had done all that career development, all that that character development in terms of Davis has been poured into Hammond in developing him and showing how good he can be, how capable he can be. Add in less than 70 seconds of screen time, he has completely changed many points in the show as far as this episode goes. Season 8, Prometheus Unbound. Remember, this is the Prometheus, not the Daedalus, the Prometheus. And that was an interesting ship. Honestly, the Prometheus is a good example in why you should really not let the accountants have any control in design and construction of your ships, especially not spaceships. But as a test bed for fusion technology, whilst they were getting ready, it was probably a good size to go with. I think it would have made more sense if they kept building those particular vessels as well as the Daedalus class. So when they upgraded the Daedalus class, also kept the Prometheus class production line, so that they could have the numbers as well. So you would have the 2 tier 4 structure. And also that would have been useful for the perspective of maybe giving it out to other partners. Not all partners could maybe run a BC-304, but they might be able to run a Prometheus, especially an evolved Prometheus with, that sort of size vessel upgraded. And it would have been useful to have more vessels. But there again, if you have limited Nequadria, you have limited refining, and you want to put out those resources for those engines into the biggest ships you can, because honestly, the amount you need for the engines on Prometheus versus Daedalus is not that much of a difference. Not much of a difference. It actually makes it viable for you to build multiple Prometheuses to fill in for a Daedalus. So you might as well build a Daedalus. There is logic behind it. There is some sound discussions behind it. As much as I think you did probably need the 2 levels of ships. Probably. Now, for me, the thing that made it most believable in this show about the reality of Hammond being a general officer, being of that rank, was there were times when he allowed people to push back when they were specialists, when there was real reasons, and there were times when he stood on his authority. And times when he chooses to listen, those show his authority in my way even more because of the way he listens, how he reacts to the information, how he deals with it. These things have bearing. They really do. And that's the thing, how does he react to a situation? How does he deal with it? How does he deal with being told no? Again, settings on the auto. The best quality that does is 360.
We've almost replaced all the superconductive interface elements, sir. The old one's all melted. It's gonna take some time to load test.
So his NCO's been testing things. That's Walter.
That'll be 24 hours, general minimum. Captain Carter and Colonel O'Neill do not have that long. I'll give you half that.
No, sir, it doesn't work that way. 24 hours is the best I can do.
And that's another NCO. That's Siler, who we saw earlier saying he's not he's not the light bulb guy. He's pushing back and going, sir, we can't do this. I'm not blowing smoke of you. I'm saying 24 hours is the best we can do with the teams we have and the facilities we have, because sometimes these jobs just take the time they're going to take. And there's no blustering, I order you. There's a realization, okay, we need to solve this problem from a different direction. We need to do something else to make this work, because we can't afford to do it any other way. We need to come up with something else, because the way I was hoping to do it ain't going to work. And the fact you can see that on his face, the fact he demonstrates that, and this is one of, again, this from Series 1, Episode 18, it really does demonstrate how much growth happened to the character in the first season. I mean, Season 1, Episode 18. Hammond very quickly evolves from the pilot into the general we will understand him as. Very quickly. And then it's just growing on that. and developing that and showing his abilities as a leader. And he does have abilities, but I started off this video talking about Hammond of Texas. And that's a very specific thing where that really comes in. And this is it.
Master Braytag, words cannot express our gratitude.
You are Hammond of Texas.
I am.
Again, this was a very interesting scene to me because it was also part of establishing Braytag, who is this elder, sort of almost, how do I put this, Jafar guru, former sort of equivalent to General First of System Lord of Apophis, but also then turned on into sort of a guru, training other Jafar and being their, their warrior mentor. And it was important because if you can say that Teal'c, who we saw a little bit off the screen there, is to an extent the Jafar equivalent of O'Neill in terms of how they're playing within their groups whilst working together in SG-1. Braytag meeting Hammond is this whole level of diplomacy, and it's also where Hammond from that point becomes Hammond of Texas, because of how to extent that the Jafar approach these things and how it's been explained to them in terms of who Hammond is. And it works so well. It works so well. And I'm going to replay it from the beginning again, because it's not long per clip. But just watch it.
Master Braytag.
Stardust, you've got an officer coming behind him who's going to be assisting him. You've got other people around as a guard, but again, this is very obviously a general officer coming in to do a diplomatic discussion. He's dressed down, but still dressed formally. He doesn't, again, he's meeting someone from off-world, so he doesn't need to be dressed in the way that he would to ram it home to politicians and diplomats, maybe his particular roles and decorations. He doesn't need that. This is a meeting between two warriors. Two, I would say soldiers, because they're both are sort of army ranks, but let's be honest, they're also both pilots, because Jafar are all trained to fly, and Hammond had been a pilot, and of course the Air Force officer. So yeah, they're two experienced practitioners of warfare. You don't need the finery to show your position. Others, a junior officer, needs finery to try and demonstrate his standing. But if you're an old man in a profession where many people often die young, all you need is you. All you need is you. And that's what Hammond is showing.
Master Braytag, words cannot express our gratitude.
You are Hammond of Texas.
I am.
Yes, O'Neill had described him as a bald gentleman from Texas. We'll leave that to one side. That's why you have the hand gesture. But, you do always think you should have the hand gesture. Richard Dean Anderson has always been, though, a colourful soul who can make any character his own. The fact that both of them had worked on MacGyver together as well, and knew each other from that. The amount of characters in this series who had worked together beforehand and pre-existing relationships and understandings. It really did help with it. It did help. But with that being said, it's now time for a shameless book plug before we get into the summary. So putting a shameless book plug in one of these videos seems a bit of a stretch, but I have got more books coming, but I'm a naval historian, so they're all naval history themed, and currently I only have one book out, which was published by Pen and Sword, which is called Tribals, Battles and Darings, The Genesis of the Modern Destroyer. And it's all about the development of the larger fleet destroyers at the, well, tail end of the 1930s and through World War II and into sort of the beginning of the Cold War, and how those larger general purpose destroyers paved the path for the modern large guided missile destroyers we have today in many navies. Now, honestly, you will have heard me mention at the beginning, hopefully, about the fact that I probably didn't get any advertising revenue for this video. If there was advertising in it, it probably won't be coming to me, because it's probably been sealed up by the TV company. Most of them do. So, yeah, this channel is entirely supported and made possible by you, but sometimes I do videos because I really want to do the topic and I go, advertising revenue. I'll just have to write it off. Probably my approach to occasionally doing videos, because I think topics are interesting and I think more people need to know about them, explains why I'm on 15,000 subscribers, not 15 million subscribers. I really should chase the clickbait titles. Bismarck, the world's greatest battleship. Oh god, no, I can't believe I even said that as a joke. No, it just wasn't. It wasn't. I'm just going to leave it at that. It was really not. If they'd stuck with the Scharnhorst line and developed them, they'd have got a far better ship than going with the Bismarck, because when they open their design studies up to redesign and build a new thing, then they get all the committees involved. And ship design by committee, where the power of the individual committees depends on who their political, how do I put this, connection is with, never leads to an efficient design. And never leads to... It has so many good potential bits on paper, it really does. The fact that it wasn't better than it was... It's purely down to the way the design decision has been made, because you could have taken those things and done a far more efficient ship, or with the same weight done a far better ship. But yeah, supporting this channel, if you're interested in supporting it, there's Patreon. There's a Patreon suggestions is live now when this comes out for June and July. And then there'll be a vote on those, and the ones which get the top of the 8 which get the highest vote will become 4 lives and premieres and 4 premieres. So they'll generate 12 videos on 8 topics for patrons across June and July. And I'm doing that, as I said, doing it because I am shamelessly rigging things to an extent, because there are certain video topics I've noticed which keep coming 5 and 6 on the vote. And I thought, well, if I make it a top 8 instead of a top 4, where I'm normally just doing 1 month, maybe some of those will get into that and they'll get done, because I think they can be really interesting. And the fact that they've come continually 5th or 6th for about 4 or 5 months, in one case 4 or 5 months in a row, shows me there already is a level of interest there in terms of patrons. So it's just not getting enough. So I thought, well, let's do a double month and go an 8 and see what happens. And see if they do get a chance. If they don't, they don't. I'm not going to rig it any more than I've done. I just sort of thought, well, it's rigging, but it's not rigging to my mind. It's opening up the chances for ones which are normally slightly lower down the list to get in. But that will mean every vote will count. Every vote will count. It always does, but yeah, it will count. It will really matter. And as well as Patreon, there is, of course, channel membership. And there is Ko-fi as well, for those who prefer that. And PayPal even, direct, for those who prefer that way, methodology. All different options. I have a Spreadshirt saw down below, which has a few things from the channel for you to, if you're interested in them. But the most important thing I'm going to tell you is not to do with just me. It's to do with everyone on YouTube that you watch, and if you like them. Okay? Down below there is a subscribe button. If you just click it, it will come up with a clear bell. If it's a clear bell, well, that means the algorithm's going to decide which videos it shows you from that subscriber, from that channel, that content creator. If you click on it and change from personalized to all, you will get told all the notifications. Every time I produce a video, so you get to decide what topic you watch. Then you have to go into the notification system on your phone and on your computer and make sure the YouTube notifications are enabled and allowed to come through, because they aren't always enabled. And this is one of the reasons why, again, you have to be careful to make sure that you have the right settings for for the people you want to subscribe to. What do you want to be notified of? Do you want to get notified every time I produce a video? In which case, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. But if you don't want your phone going off every the little vibrate or little notification appearing on the screen, you can check. You can pick whether it's just an image, a little token icon on the screen, or whether it also does a vibrate or a ping. You can decide all that. You can make that choice, and you are making that choice. And that's the thing that really matters to me, that you make the choice. I really dislike the idea of our worlds becoming silos created by algorithms for just us. I think that is a very bad way to go, because it'll be very unlikely you're going to get exposed to information which you might not have been interested in before you saw it, but after you watch it, you might be interested in that topic. You'll get very much boxed into, this is what you're already interested in, so we're just going to keep showing you the same videos, the same things. It's nice to go outside of it occasionally. There is a reason I do some sci-fi videos on this channel. There's a reason I do Age of Sail right the way through to modern day. There is a reason I do all these different topics and these years and things. It's to give people hopefully a chance who might like one part of my topic and one part of what I produce to see other things as well, and maybe they'll find they like more. Maybe they'll find some really cool books they want to go and read. Maybe they'll be really interested in the Soviet Navy in the 1920s. They'll suddenly find, after always having looked at the US Navy in the Cold War, or whatever they might find, they might be interested in. And that's the thing, because interest, curiosity are what fundamentally make us better people. And you can't have your curiosity sparked if you're always shown the same thing over and over again from different angles. You can't. You need to be exposed to something sometimes outside your normally trotted path. Anyway, with that being said, summary time. Now, to me, it's nothing new in science fiction genres of having ships named after characters when they've passed away. When something's happened to them. There's the USS Nog in Starfleet. A good ship. But it's rare that ship appears on screen. It's rare you get actually that ship being used. But the George Hammond did. He got a BC-304 as well, and as I said before, that thing is gorgeous. And apart from having a ridiculously small missile load for something that size, but it is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. And capable, but yeah, ridiculously small missile load. We'll leave that to one side. There's a whole video on the BC-304s in my series on my channel. I think from the year of the cruiser. I included them in the cruiser year. They deserve that. They definitely are just as much a cruiser as a Galaxy class is. But the thing I found most interesting when I was looking into doing this video and I was trying to search out clips of Hammond, I pretty much had to search clips of events I knew and track them down, because his name doesn't come up that much. I don't know why. He's not part of the SG-1 team. He's not the big team member, but he is something. He is the thing which makes the whole all of it work. He's the touchstone, the reference point. And he fulfills the role of what you need a general officer there to do. And that level of importance, that level of command, whilst you could explain him the position of being a unit commander, you could drop everyone down ranks and have it as a colonel, it wouldn't make sense. With the importance you have going on there, you needed someone of enough rank. The point there again was it's a line item of $7.4 billion a year. And this is something which I sometimes have to explain. Because I'm quoted things like, there are more senior officers now in the US Armed Forces than were in World War II. Yes, but the average costs of programs in terms of procurement, etc., are most of those programs cost a lot more and take place over a lot longer period of time than the B-29 and the Manhattan projects. When you start considering the cost of what you're doing, the cost of the systems you're running, you tend to want more experienced people in charge of them, people you've trained more, who have more to draw from when they're organizing, and hopefully, along with that greater seniority and experience, will also have the capability to stand up when I need to more often and say, this isn't working. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't always work out that way. Life isn't always so good or straightforward. As Donald S. Davis put it, there are general officers and senior officers run the gamut. They do. There are great ones. There are not so great ones. There are ones who are really good captains and colonels, but who are not great admirals and generals. Usually the biggest issue is that they are so used to running things directly themselves and being directly in charge. They're terrible at delegating. O'Neill was a good example of that. If you compare his actions as a general when he's first in position, what Walter is having to do, how Walter's having to guide him, versus Hammond, who was a far more experienced general officer. Remember, he was a major general. He'd already been a brigadier general. He'd already had his learning experience, his learning curve of doing that adaptation from colonel to brigadier. There's always slightly different personality, Jack, as well. So you build these things up. There is a difference going there. And Jack's a great illustration of a pretty darn good colonel who goes on to become a pretty good general, but it takes time. And honestly, while he's first finding his legs as a brigadier, he is a pretty darn awful one. He really is. And again, it's the screen time thing. Davis has a lot of time to develop Hammond into the officer we remember him as. A stalwart, but a very smart and capable officer who was very good at his job by that point. He was able to play the political game, the intelligence game, and all the other roles a general officer has to play in order to keep their command going and in order to provide the service they are supposed to the nation. Because there are always people out there who are going to ask you stupid questions. A few years ago I was in a debate with someone about whether or not there was accurate whether the whole discrepancy of the senator and all these issues which happens in Stargate could happen in real life. It wouldn't happen. No one would actually be that stupid to try and defund this sort of things. And I sent them to the video clip of the Australian senator who had to have it explained to her that these are submarines could spend more than a couple of minutes underwater. And that the propulsion system, the pump jet system, did not limit their time underwater. the thing is, once you're a politician, you're even further removed, because you might well not have that staff of specialists to assist you. In fact, you probably don't, to draw from. So you're kind of like a general officer who has had no training or experience and has no staff to support them. And you're trying to oversee these things. You're trying to oversee them. To my mind, that's always made the case that I think that if you are going to serve on a committee, there should be a pool of specialist assistants that you can draw from, to have one assigned to you if you're serving on a committee, so that you can have someone in your office who can explain these things, who can answer the basic questions and give you the grounding you need to, especially when you read the documents, so you can understand things better. But that would add cost, and everyone knows that adding cost to a political system is always an anathema to the public, because surely they would always look at the price, or the cost of having these items, not the value of having a well-informed parliamentary body, a well-informed legislative assembly. Surely that would be asking too much. Be like asking to have specialist reporters on media sites and newspapers. But that is a whole other rant, a whole other discussion. Realistically, when we're talking about Hammond of Texas and his command style, he works through officers and NCOs whom he trusts. He builds up relationships. It's about managing relationships, especially when you consider how he's deploying people. He's sending them to planets where he has a very limited ability to resupply, very limited ability to communicate, very limited ability to do any support of them at all, so he has to trust them to basically be as independent as they can be, operationally. So he has to trust them. He has to have that relationship with them. He has to work with them personally. He can't afford to have them briefed and have those briefings run by someone else other than him. He has to do them personally, because he has to make sure they know his intent as clearly as they possibly can do, because they can't necessarily get a refresher of his intent by just calling him up. They can't ask for clarification later. So that he has to trust himself to deliver his intent as best as he can, so they can understand it and go make it the case. The objectives and the intent of the mission as he understands it. As he will be responsible for. And those times he does go off-world, those times he does go out himself, they're usually justified on the grounds of he's going to provide the necessary seniority, because someone more senior than a colonel needs to go, and there ain't that many options available. There ain't that. So, normally, when I get to an end of the video, I have a question for everyone. And it's to start debate in the comments. And this is the question I want you to think about. Having heard what you've heard about Hammond, I'd like you to A, think what real life, historical maybe, example of an officer that would best fit him, that would best match in. Which officer would you think would best match in with Hammond and his style of command? And then if you want a bonus, please go through other science fiction commanders and also consider, which real life commander, real world commander they would match up with. Usually the example that I get often sent to me is that Gilliman of Warhammer 40k is Caesar, and I would say no. He is definitely modeled on a Roman commander, but I don't think it's Caesar. It's not Caesar, and it's not Augustus. He doesn't have the weaknesses those two have. He has different weaknesses. There is a commander he is like, but he doesn't have their weaknesses. I would say he's more Scipio Africanus. I would say that's more his style. Information, logistics, organization, that's Scipio. But that gets me into a whole different debate. I also wanted to add in that if you like Stargate, and if you're missing it, and especially if you like to read some good science fiction, well, I did a little search on one of my friends called Glenn Stewart, who's written a huge pamphlet of books. I would recommend especially Raven's Peace and the Peacekeepers of Sol series, because that's a really interesting take, which, in his own words, was to explain a bit inspired by Stargate, because he was thinking, what happens in the galaxy when the Gwald go? How does the universe end up being run? What kind of roles do you take? How do you deal with the problems and the fallout of this major empire and the power vacuum is created of it disappearing? How does it structure? And think about that led him to write a whole series of books, which are, they're not Stargate, but it was that sort of idea from that point that he started. And yeah, he's got so many great books. Avalon Carrier series is really, really great, and there's so many books in that series. It goes right up to the modern Dakota Confederation series. They're really, really cool series of books, and I highly recommend all of them. I really do. I cannot recommend them highly enough. But no, so if you're looking for some really good science fiction to go and read, please go have a look at that. And then, what else we got coming up? Well, next week it's Britannia Royal Navy College, Dartmouth. Then it's Emperor Pertinax, the Admiral Emperor. Always nice to remember that when the Roman Empire was going through a period of issues, that, well, it's during the year of the Five Emperor period. One of the people they turn to is a very much a bureaucrat, a technocrat, but still a capable leader who'd been an admiral, called Pertinax, and honestly was one of the better options for Emperor. And maybe we start off with John Jellicoe. These are the Tuesday videos, but occasionally Tuesday videos turn into Wednesday videos like this one did because of... Well, honestly, I put the first draft in to upload onto YouTube, and it took so long to process that by the time it was uploaded and I could check it and I found there were issues, I went, there is no chance of the second version getting up there once I've edited these things. None at all. But it's worth it. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and take care. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for making this all possible, and thank you for being great. Have a nice evening.